Now we're going to turn to a regional perspective, and for that I'm going to invite David to come up because his chiefs that he represents have the very intriguing region that includes the Ring of Fire.
Bonjour, Nistam Nuiket, Miguel Ninak, Mississauga, Credit, Magai, Shniboan, Takiwa. Miguel Ninak, Missue Magagi, Pijaik, Toshek, and the Deni Gayu, Kawi Kadian. I want to say thank you to Mrs. Credit for, for inviting us and being a part of their lands here today. Also want to take the opportunity to be invited to this event in order for for me to share what we have experienced in Matawa, as well as to hear from others. And I find that's the way that as nations we learn as we move along. First of all, I want to just point out the for me, just want to do my presentation. It's about just want to give you a bit of history, where we're coming from. And I want to tell you about what we're doing today as Matawa First Nation communities, what's happening in our territories. And then I'm going to offer some solutions which we believe can lead to a successful outcome for Matawa, as well as we believe the governments of Ontario and Canada. And we hope to, share that experience as well throughout our, I call our adventure. I come from a community, a small community called Martin Falls. We call it Agoki in our language. And it's a remote community, probably about 200 people. It's isolated, and very rarely does it have even a winter road. So the people have lived there for, as far as I can remember, and even back to my ancestors. And we are 9 communities, Matawa First Nation communities. We are, I would say 2 nations. We have Anishinaabe, that's English language is called the Ojibwe, and we have the Mishkigwak, and that's the Cree. I myself, proud to say I come from, on my father's side is Anishinaabe, and on my mother's, she's a Cree. So growing up, I've learned to say I can talk 2 languages, the Anishinaabe and the Cree. So it's really quite exciting growing up. Also in my, in terms of, I attended residential school like people my generation, and it's, I don't want to say too much about it, but it's certainly, for me, it's an experience that I wish that no one would ever go through, ever again. But after getting out of residential school, I grew up in an environment I believe there was a revolution of First Nations, Indigenous peoples. Times were really exciting. Because to be honest, I think the system that we attended kind of make us stronger, make us more powerful. And that's the generation that I came from. So I started working for my First Nation as a band manager back in 1972. And the first experience that I had working with Indian Affairs at the time, it was called, is an Indian agent came into our community, and and he came out with this big book called a voucher system. So he proceeded to hand out vouchers so the people can take it to the Hudson Bay Company to get their supplies. And following that, the welfare system came in. And sorry to say, I was one of the people that kind of started the system in our community. So prior to that, our people were independent. They built their own houses. They used the land, the logs, everything. And they never relied on any government assistance at all. I mean, that was independence. So with that, back in the 70s, as I mentioned, there was a revolution of people that came out, and one of the first things that I remember is back in 1977, there was a declaration that was made by the people of Achneepineskum Nation, or Achneepineskum people of the land, as they call themselves. And it was a declaration of independence. And they presented that declaration to the Premier, Davis at the time, and his cabinet, right here in Toronto. So it was really something to see, and I just want to give you a bit of what I don't want to get into all the details of the declaration. But one of the things, that first line that they use is, "We will use a second language to speak to you in recognition of your inability to understand our language." So what that means, they spoke in their language to the Premier and the ministers. Then they went on to say, "Once again, we want you to understand us. For over 350 years, you have failed to recognize the unique lifestyle of the Achneepineskum. It is so crucial that you understand today, as tomorrow may be too late." So it brings a lot of questions about whether that has already been too late. So they went on to say, "We, the people in the land, declare our nationhood. We of the Cree and Ojibwe Nation, who come from within your boundaries of Ontario, Manitoba, and Quebec, and who live in the Ontario North at the height of the land known as the Arctic watershed, declare ourselves to be a free and sovereign nation. We bring you a declaration of independence. We say to you that we have the right to govern our own spiritual, cultural, social, and economic affairs. We will describe to you how we are going to secure our sovereignty. We are here because we want your government to play a role in return to our form of self-government. We ask you that you become involved in our right to develop our own individual communities. We intend to make them as viable as they were before the white man came." That's the language that was used. "You are the only people who have ever questioned our sovereignty. Our rights and entitlements to this land were inherited from our forefathers. Unlike you, we have no memory of existence in other lands across the sea. We have prior rights to the custody of this land, which precede and supersede all of your claims. And just one more paragraph I want to read. This custody must remain at us. It is our sacred duty to pass it on to our born children. We do not accept illegal seizures of our land by the Europeans and their descendants. We will protect these custodian rights by whatever means necessary. So that's the, the initial part of the declaration. And growing up, I've always used and maintained, that declaration as a way of my working with my people, and also working with governments, industries, and other nations that that are neighbors to us. So that declaration has been, I would say, our leading in whatever we do within Matawa. Just give you another perspective of moving forward. A lot of that declaration principles that are outlined in that 1977 document also represented a document that was used in moving forward with the 1982 Constitution, when the repatriation of the Canada's Constitution. Our people from our land traveled to England, to lobby the governments over there that we need to be a big part of that Constitution. I'm sure a lot of you, some of you probably remember the kind of events that followed through that. So it was, and it has become somewhat of a reality, but still a long ways to go. So as you know, and as Marion mentioned, that our communities, our 9 communities, are involved in a Ring of Fire development. That was the, I guess, they call it a discovery, but I think our people knew of these materials and minerals that were there long before that. And it's actually a land where my great-grandfather, the original Achneepineskum, he lived on that land itself. He brought up his family on that land. My grandfather was born on that land. So it's very, for us in Martin Falls, it's a sacred place as well. So we have burials and sacred grounds actually in those lands. So that's one of the reasons why there's been a lot of discussions in our community. But moving forward to 2013, our Matawa chiefs, did a unity declaration. And the declaration was about, again, reiterating what the Declaration of Independence that was in 1977. And what the chief said that we will do whatever is possible to ensure that our rights, inherent rights, are always protected. Our interests, our economy, our environment, the air is going to be always protected. So that's the premise that we're coming from. So began the, I guess, the saga of what happened next. Developers came in, and the government also came in, and first of all, it was really sad to see that actually Ontario believed that they could just actually go there, give permits, tell the industry, just go ahead and develop, go ahead and do what you need to do. But that wasn't the case. We've asked the government, please don't, work with us first before you ever issue a permit. But they proceeded. So we filed a judicial review, to keep the discussions going, and we succeeded in stopping the development because our people were not quite ready to accept the development. So what happened next is in the next couple of years we come to what we call an agreement in Ontario to sit down as a government to government to build our awareness, to engage our communities, our peoples of the land, in terms of actually what's going to happen and what do they expect to see. Because our people, like every people, we have satellite TV systems and some internet, although a little slow. They see what's happening in other territories. They see what's happening in the oil sands. They see what's happening in British Columbia. They see in Quebec and in other areas, in Northwest Territories. There was some positive work that was being done, but some not so great. So they say, whoa, we need to kind of take a breather here and stop whatever's doing. So a couple of things happened, I guess. First of all, the market kind of dived down for minerals, and the Ontario government kind of decided they want to work with us. So we reached an agreement called a regional framework. And that framework had 4 pillars that we were working on. And that's the environment, the infrastructure, and we're not just talking about the infrastructure for the mining facility, but infrastructure for our communities. Our all-weather roads, housing, water and sewer. So those items and also the socioeconomic of our community, because our communities were sick. There was a lot of prescription drug abuse. There were suicides happening, and our people were not quite ready yet to sit down and talk about, what the future might hold, because they didn't see no future. So we also talk about revenue sharing. Along the discussions, the matter of jurisdiction came up. That was kind of in the 4 pillars, no matter up. We came to a discussion up to a point, and then jurisdiction came into, became, call it an issue. That's where the government felt that there was no way that they were going to ever change their legislation to accommodate First Nations. They would use their own existing legislation. So we disagreed, and so a table was set up to talk about legislation or jurisdiction, including that or having a new. So the Premier in October 2016 agreed, that yes, we need to talk about jurisdiction and how can we we overcome that? How can we have a shared responsibility, joint decision-making process on jurisdiction? So the talks are in progress, but mind you, there's been, a few bumps along the way. You probably read back on May, the beginning of May, the Premier made statements that where there was her letter was leaked to the press, and within the letter she stated that, if the 9 Matawa communities don't want to work with me, says I'll work with any First Nation that wants to work with Ontario. Well, I told her good luck with that, I doubt it was going to happen because in the past history, we know this was going to happen. But we believe that there is more incentive, more likelihood of reaching an agreement with Ontario if Ontario does not use the old tactics of trying to divide and conquer. That happened somewhere else in Ontario, unfortunately, for a First Nation that lost a lot of what I believe would be there. Anyway, so, but in the meantime, also Canada became involved in terms of capacity. Just moving, I know I don't have too much time. What we've done to date is we created our own employment training entity. To date, we've employed or trained over 500 people in our communities in skilled jobs, whether it's machine operators or heavy equipment, and also mining. We also have worked with our older youth, adults, they call them, to attain their high school diploma. To date, we have over 200 that graduated from high school. And these are the people that would never had any chance at all. We're also creating our own high school in Thunder Bay. Right now we have 50 students. We will be enlarging that to possibly 100, even 200 students. So it's a private high school, and it still works, but at this time being, Ministry of Education. But we also want to look at developing our own curriculum and ensuring that our students move on to. We also have our own environmental services called Four Rivers Inc. That's own independent, and and we're also developing Matawa Health Co-op, and that's going to take in whatever physician services, nursing, etc. And we're in partnering with hospitals and assisting institutions to move forward. And we have done a lot of work in working with our people in terms of their addictions. I mentioned about drug abuse, alcoholism as well, and now it's getting to be other addictions. So we want to work with our people to heal themselves and to help themselves. A lot of that, what we're doing and what we believe in is it has to be a community-driven process. It has to come right from the community level itself. We cannot work with a top-down approach or a program is developed by someone that's in somewhere else and try to run and operate it in the community. It doesn't work. It's a failure. So whether you adopt or whether you change or making your own, that's the way to go. And that's and everything that we do is all community-driven process. So it takes a lot of time. You know, like you practically have to talk to almost every member of your community, your First Nation, who wants to engage themselves. You know, we do have some people that are dead against development, you know, and that's a fact of life in any community. So we try to deal with them as well in the best way possible. But in terms of the, you know, the fiscal, you know, as a part of that that declaration that I mentioned before, fiscal arrangements are a big part of that self-determination. Right now, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what everybody else said the day before, and you know, there has to be some drastic changes in various levels of government, even in our own governments. Certainly, the Indian Act is, you know, it's got to go. It's not going to work for the future. The process of fiscal arrangements for First Nations got to change. Yeah, there can't be no more paternalistic approach, having INAC departments, First Nations Inuit Help Ranch, you know, deciding what's the best for you. So our people have to develop our own. So once we have kind of stand up and by ourselves, we can create our own wealth. We can create our own source revenue. We can create, you know, our own systems of education, our own systems of health, and also our own system of our own governance. And that's what that declaration was all about. Mind you, in the declaration, the achievement that, of full independence was the year 2000. You know, that was a very ambitious target, but it's working towards that. And I believe that it'll take some, you know, a generation or two yet to get that. But as long as you have that shared vision amongst your people, shared vision amongst the leadership, because that has to come. One way of a solution is it has to come from the people themselves, as I mentioned. So it doesn't matter if you know, elected leader comes along and decides on their own, you know, get rid of what's already been developed to move on their own agenda. That's not going to happen, because the people will come back and say, no, this is our vision. This is our people's vision. We want you as a leader to move forward on that. And that's the only way it's going to work. So with the 9 Matawa communities, you know, that unity declaration of standing together has to be maintained. We know we're going to go through a lot, and the thing about this project, when it's been mentioned, it's a $60 billion project. There's different minerals, chromite, nickel, etc. It's the size of, you consider comparable to what's in Sudbury, all the mines that have been there for decades. So imagine that's going to be the size of the development. But even now, they're talking a lot more in today's dollars. They're talking about $600 billion. So there's a lot to share. So not one community can't, just say, hey, that's my territory. You guys stay out of it. Because that's First Nations leadership. We've been programmed, to think about the little resources that we have coming from the governments, like housing, and it's never enough. So when this kind of development comes, it's hard to imagine exactly what that is. So there is the attitude of thinking that, hey, that mine is happening in my territory, Until I can have my own, enough of my share, then I'm willing to share it with everybody else as well. That kind of thinking has to go, because that's where the divide and conquer really makes it really easy for governments. So we don't want to ever let that happen. There is, certainly there are First Nations within the immediate area that will benefit a little more in terms of revenue sharing. But there's also the whole 9 communities that can benefit in economic development, business opportunities. And that's where the sustainability is going to come from. It's not IBAs, it's not, a quick construction, economic activity. It's the equity ownership of a mine. And that can last over 200 years. With equity ownership, you can also have a say in terms of what happens to the environment, what happens with the local economies. So, and that's about jurisdiction. And I believe we are on the right route to doing that. So I just want to finally say, I believe that vision will come true. Maybe not in my lifetime, but certainly in my children's and grandchildren's lifetime. And they need to keep that vision going, every generation. As I seen in my past, what I saw my grandfathers and fathers went through, they had a vision. So just continue on with that process, and I know for sure we will have a good future for our communities and our children and our grandchildren. You guys, thank you very much.